Hello, hello. Welcome to this next interview in the series for dog owners that will help you to discover the secrets of dog experts that will transform your life and change the connection with your dog for the bond you've always dreamed of having. Good morning, Brenda. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm so excited to be talking with you today. Brenda Aloff, did I say that right?
Yes,
Okay, I should ask that earlier. Thank you for joining.
that's
Brenda
all right. We'll
is
stumble
it,
along.
it's Brenda is a professional trainer for well over 20 years, has at least 5 published books and DVDs, and now and not only does she do clinics and workshops on around the world for helping dogs and dog owners and trainers, but also she has the Heaven on Earth ARF Training Center, where she promotes training and behavior work locally and virtually, helping dogs everywhere. I thank you so much. I'm so pleased to have you here. Welcome, Brenda.
That well, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here, Jodie. I'm so glad you invited me. We've already had a little bit of fun before we started the interview. Um, so do you um you'll have
You,
to edit that already.
that's
Sorry.
okay. No, don't worry. Don't worry. You know what? I would
I
love
was
to
going to
hear
wait for
you.
your question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Sorry, I'm sorry
Bad
about that myself.
sinuses. No, no, it's my bad.
You know what, I just love
Okay,
all your
there we
work,
go.
the work that you're doing with body language and helping people. I would love to hear some more what you do with that, and also how people meeting them where they are. Not over, letting them start from where they are in their relationship with their dog, including body language. Yeah,
Mhm,
even to helping us to understand how
mhm.
important that point is.
Okay. Um, Reading the dog is everything to me. I obviously think it's very important. I wrote a book about it. I've got online classes about it. Even when I'm teaching an entry level pet class, my instructors and I really emphasize pointing out to our clients as we're training them to train their dog. We continually point out, oh, look, your dog did this, and that's what that means. Or did you see when you reached for your dog, they kind of retracted a little away from you? So we need to work on that, because when they retract like that, that's a sign of discomfort. And what I don't want to have between a person and a dog are any, um, well, I prefer to have no retractions. I don't think you can get rid of all discomfort, because people and dogs are speaking such very different languages. And for me, the biggest problem I see when people come to me initially is that they won't shut up. They just won't stop talking. So many of my clients, after they worked with me at clinics and so on, one of my friends that I do clinics for, after I worked with her the first couple of times, she bought herself a shirt that says "Stand still, shut up, let your dog think." So she said, "You said it so many times," and I'm like, "Yes, I did." What I think we have to understand is, well, our brain is set up to process language, and it's such an integral part of how we operate that we need to express it or articulate it. And sometimes, even to figure out our own emotional states, we have to be able to articulate it before we can even really fully help ourselves with something. Understanding that animals are not operating like that. They're
Yeah.
operating on a really different level. They're looking for body language. And I tell people all the time, dogs are not expressing their emotions as much as they are their emotions. They are not capable of deceit. We found no proof scientifically that I am aware of anyway, that animals practice deceit. You don't get into that until you get into the higher primates. Therefore, when a dog is talking to you, they are always telling you the truth. I
It,
think one of the biggest disconnects between people and dogs is that dogs are telling us what they're feeling and thinking all the time. And people either don't know how to read it or interpret, or they would rather, to meet their own emotional needs, that the dog were saying something else. So the dog's not lying, but then we lie to ourselves about what the dog is saying, if you will. And I think that for me, that's one of the biggest disconnects. And that's the place, especially in a private lesson where I have a lot more time to do something with that. Of course, I'm always thinking about it, but that's the disconnect that I feel like I need to go after initially is speak to your dog in a way that your dog can understand it. Let them, if you want to train them, you need to use tiny approximations that are presented to the dog in a way the dog can understand it. For me, that really begins with body work, getting rid of any discomfort the dog has about the way I move, the way I talk, the way I reach for them. All of those things I want to make sure are sources of comfort for the dog at the end of our training. Um, and I think we really need to recognize that while we think dogs in many ways are living stuffed animals, like that's kind of, we want them to be cuddly and
Mhm.
we want them to, be cooperative and so on and so forth. Um, I think it's also important to understand that dogs may have their own agenda. If you have a guarding dog, we've bred them to do some pretty specific things and they come with that agenda. And herding dogs come with an agenda. And my beloved terriers that I had for years and years and years, who really, really taught me so much, because they don't even pretend to try to help you with it, which I love them for
I
that.
love that.
They're like, you know what, Brenda? Yeah, your emotional state, that's your problem. you know, if, and how you present material to me, that's your problem because I wasn't that interested to begin with. So if you want to talk to me, you need to sit down at the table and you need to negotiate with me and talk to me in a way that I understand it. And when I learned how to do that, my terriers went from being, like feeling sometimes like they weren't even dogs. I can remember getting my first smooth fox terrier and saying to my husband, I've had dogs all my life, and this is not a dog. People are calling it a dog, but it doesn't act like any dog I've ever owned because my first fox terrier happened to be extremely predatory. And rather than the sort of childhood dogs I had that were really cooperative and easily trained even by a child and all that kind of thing, that was not here. These dogs were they were go to ground dogs that were selected for hundreds of years, if you will, to do hand to hand combat underground, and that's what they really wanted to do.
Wow.
And anything that moved, they wanted to get a hold of it. And I had to be very careful, um, learning how to take that dog to a show because uh, there was no doubt in my mind she would not have grabbed a small animal, and it could have been a dog.
Yeah.
She kind of lived her whole life. She walked up to everybody and poked him in the chest and she said, "Are you prey?" And if you were a squirrel and said, "No, I am not prey and I am status neutral," she's like, "Oh, cool. We can sit down and have supper together." But if it retracted away from her or it acted afraid or it started to run, then it pinged a very primal instinct. And
That's a
I
challenge.
had to really learn how to understand. Yeah, I had to really learn how to understand what that primal instinct meant to her and what parts of it could be maybe altered or modified and what parts could be managed.
Yeah.
And I showed her, I got titles on her. She was one of the best dogs I've ever had. But the first 4 years with her were really a mental gymnastic for me to decide how do you live with a really happy serial killer? Because that was kind of who she wanted to be.
And it's
I'm
just
not,
it's so
yeah,
ingrained in them.
it is. And
Yeah.
understanding that instinct and not rejecting it and learning how do I want to work with that? How do I want to present it? How do I want to keep other dogs safe from her? She was fantastic with people, but how do I want to keep other dogs and, bunny rabbits on our walk and so on? How am I going to deal with that, keeping her safe basically from her own instincts and also others around her safe and still having a relationship that wasn't me just saying, no, 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 you can't do
Yeah.
that. You can't do that. You can't do that because nobody wants to live in that relationship. Nobody.
That goes nuts in the
And
life.
it was Yeah, it was quite the little training journey with her, but she had such an effect on me. And what I really learned was if, and she wasn't a dog that you could scare. So a lot of the things that I had to learn from other dogs, I did not learn from her. Like she was never retracted away from your hands. She loved to be touched. She was really social. She adored people. All of those kinds of things that clients' dogs probably taught me more about fearful behavior than any of my dogs have. But I think it doesn't matter the dog you're working with, we have an obligation to them. We're drawing them into our world and we're saying, you come live in our world. And it's a human world and it's not really set up for dogs. We have an obligation, therefore, I think, to say, I'm going to make sure that you're not afraid of my gestures. I'm going to make sure that my body language doesn't make you uncomfortable. I'm going to make sure that I find a common ground, a place where we can talk to each other in at least a rudimentary way. And I'm not talking specifically about, although it does include a cue system. Like when I say sit, I expect you to sit and I don't expect you to run the other direction, for instance. And, how do I foster cooperation so that the dog will actually go against its own instinct and do what I asked it to do, which I always feel is this amazing gift whenever my dogs did that for me.
To fostering
So
cooperation. I like that. Fostering
yes. And
cooperation.
so yeah, absolutely. And Um, so for me, that starts with eye contact, impulse control work, because impulse control is how we wake up the thinking part of the dog's brain. And it's our only chance to access the thinking part of the dog's brain and to develop it. That's the only chance we are really going to have if we are going to work with instinctive dogs, especially high drive dogs, like I often work with for performance and working dogs, search and rescue dogs, drug detection dogs, so on. And to those things, I think one of the first things I have to have on board is my body work. And so if you read my book, Get Connected with Your Dog, there's an exercise in there called Be Still. And I developed it when I was boarding because you would be very surprised at how many pet dogs you casually reach for the collar to guide them somewhere and they head whip you. They show you aggressive intent. They give you threatening body language. They might growl, they might freeze. And that's a pretty casual, natural thing for humans to do is reach for a dog's collar. We do it all the time. And I wanted to go beyond what I knew about counter conditioning because, well, counter conditioning has many uses and is very useful. And particularly for very beginning trainers, they might not have a skill set to be able to do anything else. um, you know, touch the collar, feed the dog, touch the collar, feed the dog. I'm fine with doing that. But I wanted to go further than that because that does have limitations. Because as soon as you don't have the treat, sometimes the dog doesn't want to let you do it. And again, beginning trainers have trouble with understanding how to engineer a reinforcement schedule to fade the treat out and so on. So the idea with Be Still was I could take the dog by the collar and I could do a certain kind of body work that they could then associate the handling of the collar with body relaxation. So just like the first time you go get a massage maybe, and you're laying under that towel with very little or nothing on, and the massage therapist comes in, but after you've gone to that massage therapist several times, there's you're very comfortable and you can relax right away. I always feel sorry for massage therapists. I feel like probably when they have a new client, the first 3 sessions are like, oh my God, if she just relax. So I feel like but after your massage therapist has made you feel really wonderful many times
Yeah.
by undoing your knotted muscles, and I ride horses and I'm old, so I hurt pretty much all the time. And without my massage therapist, I couldn't move my head, for instance. So I now associate my massage therapist with comfort and nourishing my soul, if you will, because she helps my body and my cells remember what it could feel like to be relaxed.
Yeah, well
And
said.
I want to do that same thing for the dog, right?
You
So
know,
when
that
you first
reminds
start with
me,
Phil,
that
yeah,
that
go ahead.
reminds I'm sorry, I'm just right away, you
Hmm,
make me
go
think of
ahead.
something that I have done. When I worked with the Border Collie Rescue, and we had worked with
Hmm.
many kinds of dogs. I looked up and stumbled
Hmm.
across leash stroking. And it sounds very similar to what you're saying, of giving that calm experience. And just it's all through
So
touch.
I often take the collar once I can. Once I can do be still with the dog, I often take the collar and rub it on the dog so it has the dog's scent. If I'm going to use a head collar, I've already done be still with the dog. I take the head collar and I rub it on the dog so it has the dog's scent. That's there's many ways to get to where I'm going. I just have a technique that I think is standardized, certainly amongst my students, has set protocols. Those protocols are repeatable. We've done it with thousands and thousands of dogs at this point, so it's a proven protocol.
It
So
sounds awesome.
mhm.
No, it sounds wonderful, because I'm all about giving them that. They need that from
Mhm.
you. They
Yeah,
need that kind of
and border
calm,
collies.
relaxed. So are you saying you would like just have spend times, calm, good, quiet time sitting holding that collar, like, and practice that kind of thing with the dog wearing it? Is that kind of what you're
Yeah,
saying?
you certainly can. I mean, you can work at whatever level that dog brings you. Some dogs you can't touch the collar. When I'm doing shelter work, it might take me 3 weeks to get there. If I'm working with um one of my breeders, so my assistant Diane Gahn, my other assistant Brenda Young, um, they both breed dogs. And we have a whole series of protocols of body work that we do with the puppies in the whelping box starting at 4 weeks of age.
Ah,
By the time you get a Diane or a Brenda puppy, I can tell you it is like nothing else you've ever had, because you get a dog that loves to be touched. And if you take it by the collar, it automatically relaxes. They tend not to mouth or bite because we've done so much desensitization around the face that the motion, dogs mouth you because of the righting reflex, right? You can do it with a newborn infant human too. You do this, they
oh yeah,
turn, right?
yeah,
So
oh yeah,
puppies do that too.
absolutely.
And also puppies greet their mother by mobbing. And
They're all
those are two, mouthing and mobbing are two very natural behaviors, instinctive behaviors that dogs do that are really inappropriate for humans.
yes.
I'm sorry. I love dogs, but I am not super fond of ill-trained dogs, right?
No, it's not
I
fun.
I am at heart, I am very much a
Yeah,
dog trainer.
it's just
And
not
if
fun.
yeah, if you're
And
a
dogs are
German
supposed to be
Shepherd,
fun.
or yeah, if you're a German Shepherd, your golden retriever runs up and jumps all over me, bruises my arms, makes me feel uncomfortable, gets my clothes dirty, not that you know, I'm dressed to train dogs, so I suppose it really doesn't matter. But you know what I'm saying? Like that's really uncomfortable and it's rude. And that dog knows it's rude. And so when people allow that rudeness to persist, remember that might mean something entirely different to the dog than it means to you.
Well said. Yeah,
And certain
absolutely.
kinds of dogs that are very bold, uh, that can give them an idea that they can boss you or they can correct you if you do something they don't like.
Yeah,
And
can be
remember
dangerous.
also, a lot of times it's not mobbing and puppy. Yeah, it's not mobbing sometimes. Sometimes it's actually the dog trying to repel you out of space because they're anxious, because every person in the world approaches a greeting differently.
Yes, yes,
Dogs, in their own native language, they've got a super standardized way that they greet.
yeah,
And if you violate it with the wrong dog, they'll correct you because they know you're being rude and they're expecting you to understand the native language,
yeah.
right? So these things that people misinterpret, so many things like that. And as I say, it means something different to the dog than it does to you, maybe. And if you're training the dog and you want to connect with the dog, you better know how the dog is thinking about these things, because actually it doesn't really matter how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, it's that gap to understanding between.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when I'm training a horse. When I'm training a horse, I train a horse.
Yeah,
I understand the species. I know that they have a lot of flight instinct. Um, about 6 years ago, I bought myself a Lusitano, and it's a Portuguese breed that was bred to fight the bull. And of all the horses I've ever worked with, let me tell you, that animal has a totally different set of reflexes. So even though he's a
Wow.
horse, it was like getting my terriers when I went, hey, wait, I had horses my whole life and they didn't do this. So the Lusitano has more, you get a lot less flight, especially than, for instance, with a thoroughbred, which is bred for flight. That's why they run fast. Um, with the Lusitano, you get fight.
Wow.
So they don't have the same set of reflexes. So therefore, my playful new horse, the first thing he did was broke my foot, because there was a moment when I was totally standing there expecting him to move off me. You know, something spooked him and I was expecting him to move off it. He was turning around to face it.
Oh my, that's
I happened to be
so
standing there, and he was young.
interesting.
Yeah, he was a 3-year-old stallion. So that, yeah, then I had to embarrassedly call my trainer and like,
Oops, what help me? What's this horse doing? That's
something
so
bad happened because I
interesting.
was really stupid.
Well, it's so
Yeah,
interesting,
and it was yeah, and it's fascinating. So when I'm handling a shepherd versus handling a terrier, I know that I might be getting some really different results. Or a border collie, talk about a pressure sensitive breed. I don't think there's anything more pressure sensitive than a border collie, a shepherd, something like that. And in the guarding breeds, the males and the shepherds really handle that reflex very different to me than a Rottweiler. A Rottweiler handles that very differently. And if you don't want to walk into the wrong thing without understanding it. I think,
Yeah,
unfortunately, experience is what teaches you these things. And it's where I learned to read dogs well, because I was often doing aggression work.
yeah.
And the first book I wrote was Aggression in Dogs. I had done a lot of work with aggression. And I learned very quickly that a dog does this and then they bite you.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, all right. So when I see that, no matter how innocent I think it looks, it might mean something entirely different to the dog than what I might be interpreting it as. So I think some of the best ways to learn body language, first, do your schoolwork. I wrote a pretty thick treatise on it, and it just touches the surface. And
Well, and like you mentioned, just like stop and watch. I've
yeah, stop
encouraged
and
people
watch.
to just
I really
I've asked
liked.
people to put a camera on. Put a camera on your living room and watch what your dog does while you guys do stuff. Like
Yeah,
there's
I think
always
the one of the best places to learn about dog behavior is if you can find a good daycare where
yeah.
they are monitoring the dogs and it's not just a day-long free-for-all. That is exhausting for the dogs because it's too much. It would be like you and I going to a cocktail party all day, every day, if it's not handled right. And a cocktail party's fine for a couple of hours, but
No,
kind of as
I've
an
actually worked
introvert.
with lots of dogs and in daycares. And yes, the funnest
Hmm.
was a smaller group and
Yes.
just getting out there and watching them play. It's the best thing. But yes, there's so much body language.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you start to learn what bullying looks like.
Yeah.
So much of what people interpret as dog play does not look anything like play to me at all. It looks like it's status related behavior. It looks like sometimes it's anxiety based behavior. Um, true
Well, and that's the
play.
importance of picking the group of what knowing what's going to
Exactly.
work
Yes. When I
together.
ran, right. When I ran my daycare and boarding kennel, we had play groups of 1 and we had play groups of 20. It really depended on the dynamic. And so we sort of did a basic split between what we call the graffiti painters and the chess players. So, mixing the chess players with the graffiti painters didn't always work well for the chess players. They might feel intimidated or just irritated. And then you have that rare dog that you can put out with anybody.
Those are the
And
best.
I know, I love these exceptions. So this lady calls me one day and she's like, we'd like to board my dog. And I said, okay, give me some information about the dog. And I said, he needs to come visit and we need to be able to handle him and so on. She said, okay. And she said, well, he's a German Shepherd Shar cross. And was it a German Shepherd Shar No, it was a German Shepherd Akita cross.
Oh,
And I'm like, oh,
That's an interesting breed.
with chow and chow. And I thought, that's okay. I won't be able to get it out of the car. Because I said to her, I said, well, I have to be able to take it out of the car without you and take it up to the kennel. And I thought, that won't even happen. We will never be boarding this dog because I'm going to put my hand on the door handle and, it's going to threaten to eat me. And I'm going to say, thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day. And then it got better. She said, well, and he's an intact male. And I said, okay, well, we can handle that. I don't have any trouble with that. But I thought, yeah, an intact male of this mix is not going to work well. So they come up. I put my hand on the door. The dog just looks at me. I thought, great, he's going to eat me when I open the door. So open the door, get his leash on, take him out. He just wags his tail gently. Nice. Very, very gentle dog. Pretty good size. And I take him into the kennel, put him in and out of a crate. He was fine. And we boarded that dog for, I think he was 6 or 7 when he started coming to us. We boarded him until he died when he was 15. And we loved him. Do you know, I could put that dog out with puppies. I could put that dog out with other intact males. I could put him out with anything. He was often one of the first dogs we introduced a new dog to. Yeah. When he was staying with us. He was phenomenal. I think that I love those exceptions that make me so happy. Anything that proves my bias wrong. Do you know what I mean? And I think those dogs remind us to be humble. Yeah. And to not, when you get just so experienced, it's really easy to generalize a little bit. And there's a reason we generalize and bias, because we see it so many times that, I've worked with a lot of fearful German Shepherds, and if you make the wrong move, they will bite you. But you know what? So will any other fearful dog.
Yeah.
They get
labeled very quickly. I think I have one of my dogs that's a foster fail. Was I have 3 foster fails. But he was taken to the vet.
Yes, I've had numerous too. Some of us aren't well.
It just happens. But he was taken to the vet to be put to sleep for biting. Mm-hmm. And he's a Pomeranian. He's a little black furry, about 11 pounds. He is the most amazing, loving dog. He has issues. Yep. He's far from perfect. He's come a long way, but somebody loved him. And I think the whole thing stemmed from misunderstanding, right? He, apparently it was, we know it was. Yep. Yeah.
I've had people over the years bring me a dog they're like, this dog keeps threatening us. And we get them to the behavior consult, or in those days I was doing in home. The dog is doing a submissive grin. So this dog is doing a submissive grin. The people are interpreting it as aggression, and then they're correcting the dog. Now, can you imagine how confused that poor animal is?
That would really mess one up.
All I have to do is explain to the people what it is, and they're like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, when he does that, just chill. He's already trying to do everything you want him to do, and he just doesn't.
Exactly. That's how simple. I know. I tell people a lot now to try smiling at their dog. You don't have to use a ton of teeth. I know it's been said you don't want to show a ton of teeth, but whatever. If you show your dog that happy openness, they're going to feel it and see it. Because a lot of people that I run into, or that train, that come to me for help, they're kind of frustrated, and you can see it and you can feel it when they're with their dog. So their dog's always getting that, and it's not even, the dog is reading them and not even getting a chance to relax. It's all learning body language.
Well, and I think if people knew what the dog was saying, they would often react very differently. And so I say that. And the other thing I say to my clients all the time, because of my cross training with horses, I'm like, if that dog weighed 1,200 pounds, you would not let it do what it's doing right now. And that leads to a lot of problems, because when you let that little puppy jump on you, it's cute until the dog is an adolescent at 6 months old and an adult at 80 or 90 pounds. And then it's jumping on grandma. And then people want to correct it. Well, that's just not fair.
No, it's way too late.
Animals,
not
dogs
late, not too late, but
and horses both, they like black and white. I tell my clients all the time, they don't care what the rules are. They just want to know what they are. Yeah. And dogs are happiest when they have a clear understanding of what you want, regardless what it is. They don't care what it is. But I think it is understanding too that dogs take repetition to train them. I mean, I had sheep for a long time. And I had a lamb that was particularly people oriented. We'd done some bottle feeding with her. I taught that sheep, well, actually, I had an intern here from the UK. She taught that sheep to retrieve a dumbbell in probably 15 minutes. And I very seldom have a dog that I can teach to retrieve a dumbbell in 15 minutes. But that's the difference between a prey animal, I feel, and a predator learning. Prey animals don't get two chances at the water hole with crocodiles. So horses and my sheep, they learned things in 1 to 2 repetitions. It didn't take long. Now sheep, you couldn't stray far away from what was instinctive, maybe, but
That's
they were
great.
very quick studies. They were
I
very
can't
quick.
imagine
She was
teaching a sheep
she
just to
she was she was the stinking cutest sheep ever. You could have taught this sheep anything.
Aw.
And we one time had an orphan lamb. Of course, I looked at Steve and I'm like, I'm not getting up at 2 a.m. in March in Michigan and feeding that in the barn. So it lived in the kitchen in an X pen. It housebroke quicker than I've ever held a dog.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Every 10 minutes, I'd put it in an X pen, and if it went pee or did its business, then it earned freedom. So it was the cutest lamb ever. It was about the size of the fox terriers, a very tiny lamb, and that lamb he'd get so frustrated until he found that he could get up on the sofa just like the dogs could. When he could do that, he thought he had arrived. It was pretty cute. And since he was better housebroken than the dogs, that lamb never had an accident in my house.
Wow,
Ever. And
that's
he was
so
in the
cool.
house
I
for
never knew. I
probably
never
8
even
or
thought
12
of that.
weeks. Yeah. Yeah.
I know.
They're very
I know.
cute. Lambs,
Some of the
they're
tricks,
adorable.
some of the tricks and things I learned that I did with my dogs were from cat tricks that I had seen. Like, just cats are trained.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
goodness!
I think some cats are very trainable and some cats are very resistant to training. I wouldn't say anything is untrainable.
Cats have such different attitudes. They're
Oh
such
yeah. Well, their
a
social system is so different. And
yes.
my daughter got a son conure, and if you want to talk crazy social systems, I got to tell you, birds are there.
I don't know. I actually really love
Oh,
watching, and I try and think about it, but I don't understand all of their system at all.
yeah, we did a little bird training. Like I taught it to lay out on its back so you could cut its fingernails or its toenails. Sorry, I talk about them all like they're people. And the day I decided I was not going to train birds anymore, we're like, get on your back in our hands. So she did it, and we went to, and I had just been touching. We'd been doing a lot of conditioning with the nail clippers, and I actually put the nail clippers on to cut the nail, and that bird looked me right in the eye, and she says, "Don't." That was the day I'm like, I'm done here. I said to Abby, "She's yours now." I got you this far. You're going to have to deal with that from here on out.
But you know what? It's really amazing when when you do start to understand and see what a dog is saying. It can change everything so much, because I find people when
It
they're training,
does.
sometimes they take it so personal and they don't realize that the dog is just doing what dogs do. It's a dog.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I
also,
think also, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say the part about that the
Mhm.
dog we have to understand the dog has to think too. We take time to assimilate things, and the dog needs to do that with our words and our language. So it takes practice and
Yeah,
practice.
I tell my people all the time, the dog is looking for body language, not verbalizations.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and dogs don't parse language. That means they really hear sounds.
Yeah.
They don't,
Yeah.
they can hear a sound and associate that with a position, but that's basically about what they're doing. So,
The body language is way more. Way more. I do
exactly.
agility
And
I do
they're,
agility and rally obedience. I'm
mhm,
addicted.
yep,
And I love what
yep.
the more working, the more you start connecting, the more just a tiny movement can get an incredible action out of your dog. It's the connection can be amazing.
I think it's interesting because I always looked for that because I was a rider first. I mean, I always had dogs, but I didn't really train dogs until I had my daughter and quit showing horses for a while because taking a small child to a horse show was it, many mothers did it, but not this mother. So, it was just dangerous. I was showing Morgans and Saddlebreds Class A, and it's not
So much
geared
fun.
for little kids. And so, as soon as she was too big for the trainer's wife to find her fun, I was done. So, um,
Yeah.
that's when I started training dogs. But when you work with a horse, it's a very silent.
Yes,
It's not that horses can't learn words; they certainly can, but it's really
absolutely.
body language, and the connection is very close because you're around them and you're astride them, and they're big and they have an amazing flight reflex. And you I tell people all the time with their dog, I mean, if it weighed 1,200 pounds and you had to get on it and trust it to take care of you, could you do that? And it doesn't seem unreasonable to me that a domestic dog should be that trustworthy. Mine have been
No,
because I trained them to be. And if you don't train them to be, they won't be. And if you do train them to be, they're more than happy to be safe, cooperative, really pleasant, fun companions. Most dogs, dogs that are abnormal, that is
they
a
can
different
learn.
story
They can learn
because yes,
to
but a
respect.
dog with a normal brain is just as happy to have respect. Most of the dogs that I see um, that come in, really, they are looking for boundaries, and their people won't give
Yeah,
them a boundary. And it makes the dog incredibly anxious.
I'm
It's the
sure
same kind of
fearful, like don't know
anxiety we
what's.
see in a toddler, in a toddler with a really passive mother or father.
Yeah,
They're pushing. They're trying to find the boundary because unless they can find the boundary, they cannot feel safe. And so I think it's so important that we understand what makes you a good dog leader, if you will,
yep, yeah,
and what makes you um, a good dog companion. What
yes,
does the dog need to do their job? And I think looking at it a little bit more clinically and a little less from a Disney perspective, if you will, is extremely helpful for the dog because the fairy tale or the dog myth that I see is so prevalent in our society is I don't think very good for dogs.
no, no,
Mhm.
it's not ideal. It's not ideal.
No.
You
And,
know, that
I've spent half my life training dogs. I really love dogs and I love the species and I love trained dogs in particular. I like dogs that are that know how to learn from us. And when we present material in protocols that are proven in ways that the dog can understand it, then the dog is so much happier with themselves as well
and
because they're
confident.
now living in a world and they understand. Yeah, they understand the world that they're
And
living
they're
in.
safe and
And
they
so
feel
I
like
think
they
that's a
fit.
that's the lovely gift.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I so the body work, if my work follows anything, it's the body work, it's the eye contact to teach them how to concentrate. You have to teach a dog how to concentrate just like you do a child. And, some of them have concentration problems and some of them don't. And you have to accommodate that as you go along. And then impulse control, because I always tell people that's what wakes up the front brain, the thinking part of the brain is impulse control work. And if you're going to have a dog with instinct, instinct is how dogs get themselves into trouble all the time.
yes,
We we are placed in
absolutely.
situations that we have to, if we can't modify it, we need to at least manage it. So, with my terrier, we kind of made this deal. I don't know that I modified her behavior, but we did make a deal that if I was present, she didn't kill stuff. That was we negotiated that contract. I did not trust her out of my sight, but if I was there, she was a good girl. Right. And I didn't expect more. Like I didn't put her in situations where she would get into trouble.
Yeah,
Right? Because she was who she was. And I think we need to accept, when she told me who she was, I believed her. I guess I'll put it like that.
It's so cute.
And I loved her anyway.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and that's
Well,
what
as
how it
I
is.
tell my girlfriends all the time, we
Yeah,
love bad men all the time. We can love a bad dog. It's okay.
there you go. But you know what? I mean, when we get a dog, we never know for sure what we're getting, and that's the child. That's
We
is
don't.
accepting that we're going to find a way to figure this
We
dog out,
don't.
to learn each other.
Yep.
I love it.
Yep.
And impulse control is it's a huge. There's so many wonderful exercises and ways to do that. Can make it fun for people just to bring it into their daily, routine with their dog to do this. It can make
Well,
in
they need
within.
to bring it into their daily routine because every interaction you have with the dog is training, regardless of what you think about it. Once again, to the dog, every interaction is a learning experience for them in communication with humans.
Yes. And it doesn't take them long if you really, when you're giving the clear boundaries and if you're connecting and understanding each other
Mm.
for it to work out quite nicely. Right?
Absolutely. One of the dogs I have right now, I got her at 11 months old. She was a breeder return, and so I took her from the breeder, and she didn't know her name. Now I changed her name, but the name she came with, she didn't know it. She lived with a human for 11 months.
Even know her
And
name.
you could say that name, and if her back was to you, she didn't turn around. And if she was looking at you, there was not even an ear flick that showed that it meant any
Wow.
blah.
That's crazy. That's sad for the
Now,
dog.
once she was with
That's
me,
sad for the dog.
it took her 1 day to learn her name.
Oh, for sure.
24 hours. I could say it if she was in another room, and she'd be like, that means me.
So was she better since it was was she better with other dogs and it needed to learn to interact with people? Now you got me curious.
Oh no, she was super friendly. She was just like a wild child. She basically lived in a house with somebody and did whatever she wanted, I think. She was
Very interesting.
housebroken. Yeah, she was housebroken.
It's
So they
very
were house
interesting.
proud enough to make sure that she was housebroken. But other than that, and she liked people well enough, but she didn't find you particularly interesting or relevant, you know.
It's
So
so interesting. Dogs are so interesting. I have one little dog that we got he came from a rescue. I'm in Canada. I think he's originally from Arkansas. He was from a mill. And that was
yeah.
actually when my husband had agreed I could get a border collie because I wanted a bigger dog. And this
Yeah.
picture was sent to me. And I mean, how could I say no? So he's another 11-pounder dog. And he's white American Eskimo Chihuahua. And he's so
Oh my
interesting.
gosh.
Yeah, he's got the
I bet
Chihuahua
he
bark.
is interesting.
He's the cutest little thing. He's all white. He's my all white guy. But it's just so
Yeah.
interesting how so he was in a cage, right? He was in a kennel. And it
Mhm.
feels what I see is that he sits and he looks and he's really good at just watching and looking around. Like he just gets into that mode quite easily because I think he was used to not being able to get out. So he
Mhm.
found a way to be satisfied looking around. But he
Yeah.
asks permission for things. And I find it interesting. Like on our bed, if he goes off the bed at night, when he comes back, he'll actually make noises on the floor until I say, yeah, okay, come on.
Yeah, come on up.
Is it like when we're
What a nice
sleeping?
dog. And now there's another unexpected thing, right? As soon as you say American Eskimo Chihuahua, I think of all of those dogs that I've met. And my husband says I get very skewed too, because people usually don't come and say, "Hey, I'm going to pay your fee because I want to show you how cute my dog is," and all of its cute tricks. I'm usually seeing dogs that may be problematic.
Yes.
So I do get pretty skewed. It's like Steve says, there are millions of dogs that don't need you, and I'm like, it's true. That's true.
It's okay.
And a
You're
good
doing
thing.
great
It's a good
work
thing.
though. So yeah.
I love pet dogs because it's my business, but yeah. So, but yeah, that he's such a clever little guy and so thoughtful.
Really.
Because don't you think
Hey,
that's pretty thoughtful?
it
I mean, I
is.
think it's probably if you think of all behavior as being on a continuum, like there's caution, and right after caution to me is curiosity if you play your cards right. And on the
Yeah.
other side of it is fear if you don't. But
Yeah.
he's taken his caution and he's channeled it in a really interesting way so he didn't So he was not fearful. He channeled it into a curiosity, a quiet curiosity where he could look at things until he felt comfortable instead of recoiling or retracting from them. That's pretty clever.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You know what? I swear he's one of my smartest ones. He's just
Yeah,
with the Chihuahua in him makes him a little yappy to do some stuff sometimes. But when he watches
sure.
me do things with the other dogs, I have honestly let him out of the kennel after he's watched and he'll just do something after he's
Yeah.
watched me training another
He's
one.
yeah, big on the allomimetic behavior. Yeah, that's a pretty cool dog.
He is.
You're lucky to
I
have
got,
him.
I got
Lucky
a
to have him.
little 4-pack. Yes, they keep you busy.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I've had as many as 12 in the house, and I've owned a lot more than that at once, when I was doing rescue, especially because when I took a rescue dog in, I'd usually spend 6 months to a year rehabbing it,
Yes.
and then I would rehome it. I didn't
That
always take that long. Some dogs were ready to go in 2 or 3 months, but
yeah,
I wanted to
that's
make sure that once that dog went into a home, they were never going to come out of it. I was very firm about that. That's not okay.
That's,
That's
they
really hard
that
on
was I
dogs.
do want and am doing some rescue work. But that was the rescue I was with. The dogs they at the house, which was not that far from where I am. The dogs were all
Mhm,
kept nearby or kept in the yard and in the house, and
mhm.
definitely the
Yep.
problematic ones were either stayed,
Mhm.
yeah, because the dogs that come into rescue can't just walk out the door. And usually those ones are the
Yeah,
ones
I
that
have pretty strong feelings about how how
but I
rescue
mean,
should be
so a lot
done
of times
because sadly, I deal with the tragic consequences of bad
that's
placements.
That's what I was going to say is that's what,
And
I
that
get people that adopted a dog and they said it's never bit and it's great attitude and all of a sudden it's bit someone and they've had it a week,
yeah,
and yeah. And so like,
yeah.
yeah, this is what I'm hoping to help is people to start understanding that their dog is talking to them and trying to communicate. And
Yep.
so that we can prevent the rescues, getting dogs being put to
Yeah,
sleep, like my
absolutely.
Hogan, who is the little love bug,
Mhm.
would have died because he was misunderstood and scared and
Yeah.
defending himself in
Yep.
his mind. So
Yep.
it's good stuff. You know
Yeah.
what else I was going to
So, well,
mention?
this was yeah, it is
Sorry, I was just going
good
to mention
stuff.
one other thing that I really like that you said was talking about planting seeds, right? Planting seeds in people. I think you were talking about like to help people when they're not understanding, when they're not really getting it and kind of being
Mhm.
at their level.
Yep.
And
Yep.
just really appreciate how looking and stopping, like you said, just stop,
Mhm.
watch, and look.
Well, sometimes people aren't ready to hear what the truth is. They need to be ready to hear it. And sometimes you're 2 to 3 lessons in before they can see what you're even saying. As my assistants say to me all the time, remember what you're seeing, a lot of people aren't even seeing. So when you talk about it, they don't have any way to even relate to what you're saying
Yes.
because they can't, you know, you see the dog forming sentences for you, and the people see the dog sniffing the ground and then peeing.
And not listening,
And
right?
then they do this and then they do that. They're just like, well, that's what dogs do. And I tell my students all the time, movement is language for a dog. Movement is language. That is how they speak to each other through movement or
Okay.
stillness or ignoring. In the animal kingdom, ignoring is acceptance. Neutrality is friendly. I've had clients say, my dogs, they never really play or anything. They just kind of hang around together. And I'm like, that's super friendly. It means that there's no status issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because something can start out as play and turn into status very quickly. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
And so that kind of neutrality, that's a beautiful thing as far as I'm concerned. That neutrality is friendliness, and people don't always recognize um, sort of these basic premises that I've observed and cataloged over the years as being prime components of animal language, canine language, which is what we're talking about. But it's true in other species. My husband feeds some feral cats, and we try to get them handleable. It's not always possible.
Yeah.
Um, but if a cat is eating at a bowl and another cat walks up and they're both eating out of the bowl, that's very friendly. that
Yeah.
neutrality. Because if the other cat even looks up, the approaching cat won't come closer. And if he does, he's probably going to get swatted.
So much
And it's
language.
understanding, yeah, it's understanding that subtlety, because dogs communicate very much the same way. If a dog is laying on a bed and the other dog walks up and the dog laying on the bed doesn't even look up, the dog that's approaching has permission to lay as close as they want to. If that dog even looks up, he is saying, get back. I don't want you to lay down near me.
It's true, and
It's
it's
subtle, it's
nonverbal.
quick.
It's just
Mhm.
action, and they're so clear.
Yep.
Like once you
Well,
learn
they
and understand.
understand, yeah, they tend to understand their own language pretty well, although many dogs ignore the language of other dogs, and that's rude. Yeah, people, well, I just don't think he understands the other dogs. Yeah, he probably does understand the other dogs very well. He's ignoring their discomfort and walking over top of it. That's rude.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no other description of it.
Bully. It's rude.
And I think it's also understanding dogs don't have self-awareness, so they don't have morality. Yeah, that changes everything, doesn't it?
Yes.
It really
Yeah.
changes everything. I mean, I've imagined what it would be like to be a dog. And so if I'm a dog and what you have, if I can take it away from you, it's fine. It's mine. I don't ever think, "Oh, Jodie really worked hard for that bone and it's hers, so I should leave it alone." I would never think that. That would never
That's
enter
true.
my mind, because it doesn't matter. If I can take it away from you, then it's mine and it's not yours anymore. And if you
That's
let me take it away, then I can take it. And if you fight back, then I have to make a decision about how much it means to me.
it's true. Oh my
And
goodness.
then
That's
it's about the bone or it's about the status. And it could be about either one. And it doesn't.
yeah, the bone conversation in this house is quite interesting. It's and it has to be
Yeah,
managed.
yes, the bone
Like
conversation is always interesting. I
yeah,
had
well,
to.
and you know what, so it's something I
Mhm,
have to manage, and then I've learned to manage because I don't because I want
mhm.
them to still have these things, and if I have to, separate one or whatever I can do to get the other to relax, or it's worth it. It's worth taking the
Mhm.
time to learn and understand and to
Yeah,
live
I mean,
together.
my dogs had certain things that they could only have in their crates.
Yeah,
And I didn't try to make them uh, I didn't expect them to share. I might enforce something that looked like sharing. Like if one of my younger dogs went up and tried to take something from one of my geriatric dogs, I'm like, no. I
yeah,
get your species. I get your, code of ethics. It's not mine. And I'm standing here. And to some degree, I'm your mother's. So no, you're not doing that. Go do something else.
yeah, they have to
Uh,
learn that.
yeah, because otherwise they're just going to bully if they can, depending on their personality.
And it can
And
start
some
right
dogs
then. It
don't.
can start as when they're young like that. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
I found, like, other dogs can really teach other dogs really well. Like you said, having a dog that
Yeah,
works with the others.
if they have a good, yeah, if they have a good, mhm, if they have a good personal code of ethics, and some dogs have a personal code of ethics that I really like, and some dogs not so much. It's an individual thing, just like it is with people, right?
Exactly. That's why it's worth it for people to take time to learn their own dog, because there's no direct manual. Each one is different.
They
And
are all different, every
bringing them
one.
into your environment, now that's different too. So, spending the time, it's really worth it. I think
Well, the
people have the dogs they want.
absolutely.
They just maybe not quite exactly how, but they still have a dog that can be what they want. They just need to learn how to get there. And it starts with body
Yeah,
language
some
and
people, yeah, it does start with body language. Sometimes it's a poor dynamic, and the dynamic is never going to work. I actually see that quite a bit.
it
And some
happens.
people choose to make some people choose to make whatever changes they need to get the dynamic to work. And some people either do not, or there's something in them that makes it just too uncomfortable or something. Um, but yeah, the dynamic that occurs between a person and a dog is a very unique thing.
And I
And
believe in possibilities.
it needs
And
to
I
work somehow. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I always think, like, if somebody's come to me, they're trying, they're wanting to make this
Mhm.
work.
Yeah.
So, I
Mhm.
mean, if
Mm.
I like to
Yeah,
foster
as long as
that,
they can
right?
follow directions.
Yes. It's an interesting challenge. It's not, to me, it's not the dogs.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Sometimes it can be if I have, you know,
It's
uh,
getting it to
a,
work together.
a young professional with a Dalmatian in a fourth floor apartment.
Oh,
I think that dynamic is not probably ever going to work out very well, to be real honest with you, and it's certainly not going to work out to the dog's benefit.
I was thinking right away, I thought, I
You
hope
know
it's an
that
active person.
that dog has requirements. Yeah, that
Yeah.
dog has requirements physically that maybe that person cannot match or meet. And so
Wow.
I think those dynamics need to be looked at very closely. If you have fox terriers, I told people if your children were under 9 years old, I would never recommend a terrier. They
No.
got pretty quick tempers. It's just a bad dynamic. I don't think it's not that it can't work. It's that um, I think the prognosis, if you will, is guarded. And
Yeah.
I would never, that needs to, that's a very personal decision then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough, getting the right dog is
Yeah,
when that's the other
dogs,
thing.
yeah, dogs are who they are. And I think we need to take into account who they are and then um, make sure that that dynamic is going to match up, which is why I tell people, why don't you call me before you get a dog? Let me
Yeah.
help you find a dog that will match up with you well, because that can work out really well. And a dog that doesn't, you know,
True story. A true story, right? And
yeah,
because it's such
it can
usually such
be
an
it can be
emotional
very sad.
a lot
Yeah,
of
it's a
times it's an
really
emotional,
emotional thing.
they go decide to get a
And
dog, you get
so
it and you
I've
love it. And
certainly
then it's like,
helped
oh,
clients rehome a dog and get a more appropriate dog.
yeah,
I've done a fair amount of that. I don't do so much of it anymore because it's super time consuming. But
it happens.
I certainly in the past, heck, when I had my boarding kennel, I just took the dog. If it
Yeah.
had maybe a bite history or something, but I thought the dog looked pretty trainable to me, uh, I would
Yeah.
take the dog and rehab it and find it a suitable home, somebody that understood it well and was willing to the dynamic had a better chance of fitting, you know.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but
No, it's one of the
professional help with your
challenges.
dog is a good thing.
It's one of the
Mhm.
challenges for sure,
Mhm.
for people, and that we get to try and help them with. It's
Yeah.
nice if they come before they're going to get the dog,
Yeah. Like
definitely.
I learned how to make that dynamic between my terriers and I be fabulous. But it was a lot of work. And if I had been a single mother with 4 kids, I wouldn't have had time.
Yeah.
If I had been any mother with 4 children, I wouldn't have had time. But you know what I'm talking about there.
Yes.
I had one child. I have a husband who's very supportive of all my animals, and so I had the time to figure out that dynamic and make it work, and it did. With that first fox terrier, it took me a good 2 to 3 years to figure out what was going on. I was way behind her, which she pointed out to me frequently.
I love the way you
So
say that. Yeah, they do. They do tell you. I have a Jack Russell Italian Greyhound, and but he's quite different
I bet
than
that's hilarious.
he sounds quite different. He came with lots of fear and lots of energy.
I
And
bet.
he's my
Yeah, well,
agility
the fox.
star. And the more we
Yeah,
connect, like you say, the body language, I see it, especially in videos, and I feel it. I feel how just any little movement, it just gets better.
yeah.
It's really exciting to connect
Yes.
and help them
Yep.
out.
Yeah.
It's just
I
so
think
much.
it's a wonderful thing. That's for sure.
It is. I'm so
That
happy.
connection is such a big deal. Yeah, and it's all about language. It's all about understanding the species, um, the breed, and then the individual that you have in front of you, and then you're basically with every dog creating a lingua franca, right? If you were on the Bali Island and I come in on a ship, the first thing we're going to do is try to communicate with each other. And that language that we create, I don't speak this and you don't speak that, but we make a language probably made up of a little bit of both languages and a lot of gestures and so on.
Yeah.
And we start to agree on meanings. That's a lingua franca. And I always feel like that's what we're doing with dogs. With each dog, we have to find our own lingua franca in order to have a good communication.
And it takes a bit of time and conscious effort, but it's so possible. I love that. That's well
Oh, it
said.
is so possible. Yeah, they're waiting for it.
Yeah,
They're
that's what
waiting
I've been
for it.
saying. Everybody's, your dog's waiting for it, and their lives are shorter. They're sitting there waiting to have this great time with you,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
really want to.
Yep.
I'm so
That's
glad
true.
you joined me today. There's so
Oh,
many,
Jody, that was so sweet of you. I enjoyed it a great deal.
so many great
So thanks
golden
for the
nuggets.
invitation.
Yeah. So just hang on. I'm going to stop the recording for a second. Okay. I
Okay.
so appreciate it. What a wonderful conversation. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. It was fun. Hey.